all, another thing is that I'm not I'm not someone who missions to have every child with an iPad because that's going to transform education. I don't think so. I think it certainly is a tool that can do that, but I don't think that's all that you need. So I'm going to talk to you a bit about the background about where I'm coming from with using the iPad as a tool to enhance education. And I use the word enhance very deliberately. I think it's digitally enhanced education, not digitally replaced education, if that makes sense. I think if you keep doing the same thing you've always done on an iPad, you're still doing the same thing you've always done. Education is not going to progress. It's not going to move any positive direction unless we sort of change that fundamental thing. But before I really get stuck into it, I'll tell you a bit about myself, give you a bit of context. So I'm from Cape Town, South Africa. I teach at a school called Bridge House, which is located in the Franschhoek region of the Western Cape. That's a picture of the school. Overlooking the high school section. That's the view I have at my office. There's an aerial shot of what it looks like where I am. So we're surrounded by wine farms and cattle farms predominantly. It is a private school by South African standards, so we are fairly exclusive in terms of who we take in. We do have a lot of students who we help, we assist financially, and we also have a number of students who local farmers are putting through the school. So they will have labourers who are largely uneducated, and then the farmers will actually take their children and say, you know what, we're going to pay for them to come and have this education. So we do have that as well. So we have, and then, like I said, it's an exclusive school, but just like I'm sure is the case here, you have people who are being dropped off in Ferraris and Bentleys, but you also have people whose parents are working themselves near to death every month just so they can afford to send their kids in. So we have quite a broad range of students. Here's just another look looking the other way down the valley. We're a boarding school. We have approximately 60% of our students in boarding. 40% of our students in boarding. And we're planning to move that to an 80-20 model eventually. We're busy with an $11 million expansion program. We've got another campus we're building. So all that, I can show you all this land here. There's all going to be sports fields, all that area around the back is ours. So we're busy with quite a large expansion program. And then this is just a photo looking down just above where I live as well. I live in the town, just so you can get a sense of where I'm from. My job within the school is I'm the director of what we've called the Learning Commons. Up until last year, I was a high school English teacher. I taught grades 8 through 12. And at the end of the year, they built a new centre onto the school, and they asked, we're looking for something to be quite different. It's got to house our library, media centre, but we want it to be something that people from around the world are going to say, what are they doing there? So I kind of reinvented the model, and I created what's called the Learning Commons. This is some pictures, just something we moved in March. As you can see, it houses the library, but it's meant to be an inviting space. All the furniture is custom designed, so I put cool bookshelf, nooks in the bookshelves so the kids feel invited, feel like they want to come inside, and you'll be amazed we can get at least 6 kids into one of those things. They push it. But they climb on top of the bookshelves, they're under the bookshelves. We've just recently introduced these, which are the big bean bags. Those are also made for us. Those are very, very popular. We've got tons of those. And this is just some of us getting a robotics workshop, but you can see sort of the space is very versatile. And what I've tried to create in the space as well, and actually what I wanted to do with the session, so please feel free to move around and move the chairs and sit how you want to, because none of us is going to work the same way. You might prefer to sit at a desk. I personally work better on my stomach. I'm going to do something for a long time. I lie on the ground, blankets and stuff. Other people might prefer to sit at a bar stool. It really is up to you. And so I've tried to cater for that inside the centre. There are lots of different seating places. You'll see there's a jungle gym platform that actually gets used more by the college students than it does by the babies. Even though it's meant for the babies, they're reading castle, we call it. But the college kids are always up there. The other little side of my talk is just to give you a sense that because I'm from South Africa, there's all this wonderful stuff happening. There are also a lot of challenges. So let me show you the reading of our standard high-tech internet speed by South African standards. That is what we get. That is our internet. That is $6,500 worth of internet. That's what that will buy you in South Africa. This is considered fairly fast. At 3.25 megs I was getting in, this is a good day. This was after work, when none of the kids were there. So usually it's sitting, you can see some of those other figures, usually about 1.47. That's usually about right. That 4.94 is at home. So I have slightly faster internet at home, but to get into enterprise level that you're going to be sharing across a whole lot of users, this is pretty good. There is one school in the Western Cape that gets 40 megs, but they are paying close to, let's work this out, close to $120,000 a month for it. So if at your school slow internet is something you're going to blame on you not being able to introduce an iPad, I'm here to tell you it's not an excuse. Okay? I've really just experienced the standard internet here at the place I was staying in Boston. She was paying like $40 and she got 20 megs a second. So we have this to contain. There are a number of other things that I will talk to as we go through. But this is hopefully going to give you a sense of if you thought, we can't do this. Yes, you can. I promise you, you can. Here's an interesting thought for you. It might be slightly different by American standards. This is based on the South African school year that runs from January to December. But kids starting next year are going to graduate in 2027. We keep using that date that the iPad came out in 2010, the very first one. The first camera that could take a photo came out in 2002. It could take a 0.3 megapixel photograph. And now we've got cameras that will take you 21 megapixel photographs. We've got, I mean, you just think the fact that as well that I can, it blows my mind. I've been talking via FaceTime, talking to people at home. Instantly. There's no delay, I have no problem. So the signal is going through my phone, through a Wi-Fi box, to some other box, across the ocean, across the world, across some more technology, into another phone, like that. And this is my pocket. I still remember having to install Microsoft Office and it taking 16 hours with 45 Pacific disks. And you always got to like disk 35 and then it said error, you have to start again. You know, just let's get our heads around this. What is going to happen? That's not so long ago. You know, that's what, 15 years ago? What's it going to look like in 12 years' time? What's going to be different? What's going to happen? How is our education system meeting that? And that's the big question here. It's not so much, cool, stuff's going to happen. How are we preparing people for that? What is school doing about that? One of my favorite little stories that I tell people is, you look at how much things have changed and progressed, but I promise you, if you took someone from, let's say, 1880, and brought them here, they would be totally lost and confused. They wouldn't know how things work, they would be baffled by the speed, they would be uncomfortable, they wouldn't recognize anything. Take them to a school, they'd go, I know where I am. I'm in a school. They would know that immediately, because the desks would still be in rows, the kids would still be sitting down all day, the teacher would still be standing at the front lecturing at them. Something doesn't work for me, and I think if we're preparing kids to be active in a world that we can't even really think about properly, something fundamental needs to change. So a lot of my work deals with these 21st century skills. I don't know if you're familiar with them. There are lots of places doing work on this. There's a university in South Australia that's busy teaching a degree in this. You can do a degree in 21st century skills. And this is kind of what they put together as being. My last one, the thing that I kind of chuck in here, is this one. It's the one I sort of add as my own little sub-point, I guess. Is that personal and social responsibility. And there's a reason for that. So let me ask this question. I'm hoping it's one that you've asked yourself. And I'm hoping it's one that you ask yourself on a continual basis. Sometimes, I imagine, with your head on your arms over a pile of asking to do, why am I doing this to myself? But hopefully it's something that you're doing every day when you walk into a classroom of students and you're looking at their faces, looking back at you and thinking, why am I doing this? Why am I about to say what I'm about to say? And my answer to this, originally, I'll be very honest with you, when I was a teacher, was power. That was the reason. I was bullied terribly at school, I was kicked around, I was treated very, very badly, and so I wanted to get back. I wanted to be the teacher because I could be in control of them. I could tell them where to go and what to do. Luckily, someone talked me out of it, and it changed. And the answer now, and the answer then, and I think the answer for a lot of us, is we teach to change the world. And I don't say that lightly. I'm not trying to be an idealist. I'm not saying it because it's cute. I say it because I honestly and truly and genuinely believe it. If you look at most of the people in most countries in the world, and I'm generalizing here, yes, they have been through an education. Something has happened to them, that they have gone through classes, they have been taught by people, and yet we have this disconnect. The environment is suffering. It's in a position where it is unsustainable. We cannot deny this fact. We're starting to do things about it, but it's maybe a little bit too late to really fix it. We have people who don't want to talk to each other. We have spiraling suicide rates. We have economic declines. And yet we've all been taught, we've all been educated. Something there doesn't add up to me. Something doesn't quite work. And I think that because we have this tool where everyone is going through education, that is one way to reach everybody, is upgrading that. This is from a gentleman called Stephen Brookfield. It's from a book called Becoming a Critically Reflective Teacher. Very, very good read. The words I want to draw, I'm not going to read this to you because you can read the literature. But it's that sense there that act towards their environment and each other with compassion, understanding, and fairness. That to me is yes. That's world-changing stuff. Is it going to improve their grades in maths? Well, we'll talk about grades in a bit. Sorry, we say maths, not math. It's pretty clear. But that last thing where we say, the world our attempts are never simple, never unambiguous, because we're always going to come at it from a particular angle. So mine is I want to change the world, I want to stir things up. I'm not particularly concerned with curriculum standards and assessment and stuff like that. I really couldn't care less. And we'll talk about that as well. But you've all got your personal agendas that are coming through. We need to be aware of that. The big thing, though, is that the sincerity of your intentions does not guarantee the purity of your practice. I think a lot of the times we come into school and we do these things and we go, yes, we know we're going to change the world and I want to do this and I'm going to make them think for themselves and they're going to be creative and engaged. Turn to page 7. Do examples 1 through 9. Don't look at the back of the answers there, but don't look. Let's grade them. You don't understand? Do 20 more, please. You finish quickly? Okay, go and do exercise 6 with me. We're not going to get there. And I'm guilty of this myself. Please don't think of this as a huge finger pointing. I do this too. I'm going to show you some resources that I'm using now. We are not one-to-one yet. We plan to be one-to-one in 2016. It's a 2-year program we're busy working on. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how we're getting there as well. But this is the thing that you need to remember, is sometimes, yes, we've got the best intentions in the world, but we need to look at what we're doing. Because sometimes maybe we're not quite getting there, and it's an ongoing process. Again, I'm not speaking as though I'm someone who's done this and I've completed done learning all the time. Stephen Brookfield. So what I have put together is an 8-step process that I believe should underlie education, something that I try to work into all my practices. It's something that I try to work into my life. None of these things are mutually exclusive. Often I think a lot of things in education, I've certainly noticed here, it's definitely the case in South Africa, but people spend their time working towards an endpoint, the SATs in this country, in ours it's the matric exams. I have grade 8s having exam burnout in the June examinations, which are mid-year exams, having to go to psychologists for trauma counseling because they're panicking about exams, because the emphasis gets put on them. I'm sure we're not alone, and this continues. And then I have a 10th grade boy coming to me, and he's bright. He's really, really bright. And he comes to me, and he looked very, very down. I said, Josh, what's the matter? And he said, I just realized I'm doing all this work, and I'm putting in all this effort and all this stress for something that's going to count 5 minutes in my life. I said, what do you mean? He says, it's going to count when a university picks up a piece of paper, looks at my name, looks at my grades, and says yes or no. After that, no one cares. You don't know what I got in high school? No idea, doesn't matter. You don't know what I got at varsity? Doesn't matter. And yet, grades, everything's about grades. So for me, there's a shift that needs to change here. It's something that needs to go beyond the school walls. It's something that's going to impact onto the world beyond. The first of those is encouraging dedication. And this is something that the gamifying situation really encourages. Gamifying is fantastic. It teaches you to keep trying. How many times have you played that level on Candy Crush? You will freaking do it because you're going to beat this level on Candy Crush. And we're all nodding. How many of our Farmville farms got so massive until we had to start paying? It was mine. It was whenever I have to start paying, it's when I generally start playing. My Farmville was awesome. I was dedicated to that thing. I was on those crops all the time. Okay. When it comes to school, not so much. My maths problems, my maths wasn't so fantastic because, I have to work with this geography really over and over, geometry, spectroscopy. And I didn't enjoy it. It was difficult. I didn't see this thing. I didn't see the point of pushing, continuously trying. And it's something we need to teach kids is important. Because you know what life is like. Sometimes you go outside, it doesn't work the first time. Anyone gardening here? Actual real gardening, hands in the dirt? You will know that sometimes you plant something, sometimes you do everything it says in the books, you step back and they still die. Anyone who's tried to raise an orchid will know this. It's a big thing in South Africa, is getting orchids. You can go to the supermarket and get them that are fantastic for about a week and then they die. Even though you feed them all the food and stuff. Anyway. A little side note here is none of these are meant to just be for the students, by the way. These are for us as well. The best way of encouraging any behavior is by modeling it yourself. So if you believe that something is important, you need to show them that it's important and show them that it works. So dedication is something you need to do. I'm not going to give up on you. That's dedication for a teacher. Is that kid who you can see they're just not getting it and not getting to the point of going, you know, I've done as much as I can do. No, maybe you're all they have. So maybe you need to have that dedication. The next one is my personal favorite, but not all of these are important, is practice your art. And that means something different to all of us. Why do you teach what you teach? I'm a poet. So I write poetry, and you're commenting on the spelling of practice. It's a verb, not a noun usually. The English is, so I'm a poet. So the reason I love English is because of poetry, and I love it because of the vicarious connection I have to other people's worlds. It's an experience I get to share with people. Am I still writing poetry? Well, yes. Yes, I am. But so often that doesn't happen. We get into a subject because we're passionate about it, and then we stop because the grading and the planning and the admin and all that stuff. We're not doing the thing that drew us to the subject in the first place. We're not doing that thing that made us get excited about English in the first place. At the same time, we need to encourage kids to do the same thing. Do what excites you. Get engaged with stuff. A lot of my assessment is open-ended when I do stuff in class. I say respond, and I stop there. The iPad, I'm very excited to see how they're going to be able to respond. We have had the chance of getting them. We've got 25 we can share out at school. When I say, you've got me to go, and I give them sort of an hour or so, I don't tell them how to respond, but I get awesome stuff. I get paintings back, I get drawings, I get poems, I get movies. That's the instruction. Respond. And they get to practice what it is that really appeals to them. Act it out, drama. But you do it too. If they're given a writing assignment, sit down and write too. If you enjoy writing, write along. Get them read it, criticize. I get them to criticize my poems all the time. You know how fantastic it is to go to a 10th grade class, read them a poem I wrote and say, well, what do you think? And they reach the point where they go, I don't think that metaphor works. It's fantastic. They're getting it, they're engaged, and they feel open to do so. And then you know what, they share their writing with me, because that's the culture we create. The next one is encouraging excellence. And excellence is something that you do the best you can do. That's what excellence really means. Not comparing yourself to another set of standards. What is the best thing that you can do? And again, are you teaching with the same notes you've used year after year after year in the same standard board voice and you're bored with it? Or are you pushing the envelope? Are you trying new things? Are you trying to change the way things are done? Because if you're not, they can see it. Why must they put an effort in when you're not putting an effort in? So that excellence is very important. And in a world where competition is so huge, there's so many people, how are you standing out if you're not excellent? I promise you I'll get into the iPad stuff. As I said, I just don't want to throw it out. Remember why you're doing it. That motivation for why you got into this in the first place is very important. Why are you in this job? Why are you practicing this career? Why are you doing what you're doing? If you're not aware of that, it's difficult for students. If you are, it's very difficult for them to understand things. Often, you were those students. I was always that kid in maths going, why do I have to learn how to calculate a parameter? Am I ever going to use this in my life? Am I ever going to do something with this? I was that person. How many of you are they all English teachers? How many of you have been asked that famous question, why are we reading Shakespeare? Okay, I actually have a soapbox that I've made. So my soapbox is, I go and drag it. That's when they ask me questions like, why are we doing this, or why are we still reading Shakespeare? The soapbox gets dragged across the room, put down, and I stand on the soapbox, and I swell up to my full size and I blast them for about half an hour. Curry. They never ask again. I also have one of those air horns that's called the can of scorn. So we're not allowed to beat kids anymore. So I just use the can of scorn. And if they ask a question that's really like, why do we do this? Or what can I help you with today? Can we have a free lesson? Then the can of scorn is retrieved and they get scorned. It's great stuff. But for them, they don't make those connections. They don't understand. They don't understand why it is they're learning these things. Why are we doing Shakespeare? They don't get this connect. In fact, they don't generally get the whole school idea in the first place. Why am I at school? Because I have to. And the worst answer to that is, well, because I need to get into college because I need to get a job. That's my worst answer. That should be the last of your priorities. You should be in school for enriching purposes. So we need to try and teach them that wonderment. Effort for effort's sake. You put an effort in because that's what you do. You get to live life once. What are you doing with it? So if you're not actually putting an effort into what you're doing, what do you expect to happen? It's not an effort, it's not a means to an end all the time. The worst question I also get asked is this for marks? If we don't say grades, we say marks. So, is this for marks? Which is again, usually you can't score at the moment. Okay. But what I've discovered is, marks have become the currency of education. We're training them to be beautiful little capitalists. I'm not going to do this unless I'm being remunerated. And the way I'm being remunerated is through marks. So if you're not going to pay me, I'm not doing it. It comes back to that previous one. They don't understand why they're in education in the first place. So teaching them that making an effort is important, even if it's not for marks. I always, again, this is generally a soapbox moment where I come and say, do you honestly think I would waste your time and mine by giving you something that's not actually going to benefit you? But they don't get that generally. So you need to try and show them that it's important. And again, are you the one making the effort? Are you modeling the behavior? Because if you don't, you can't really show its value. The best story I can tell when we're doing storytelling was Schrock's example of storytelling. So the University of Cape Town, where I studied, is up on the mountains and overlooks the whole city. And my girlfriend is there at the moment, and I went to pick her up one day. And I was walking, and there's one place where you can stand and you literally look across Cape Town. And I suddenly had that moment. I had stuff from work, staff issues, things going on in my head. And I looked across the whole city, and I had that moment where I realized how small I was. Because I went, oh wow, I can't even see our school here. Look at all these houses, look at the little cars, all these people. And then I realized I'm a tiny speck on the corner at the bottom of Africa. We don't know where Cape Town is, right at the bottom of it. On a continent, on a planet. And we freak out about stuff. We let it consume our entire beings. How often have you moved schools or tried to change something to have an head of department tell you, oh no, you can't change this. We don't do it like that. I tried to introduce blog writing for my grade 9s. Instead of doing some kind of biographical profile, let's write a blog. That's more interesting. You can do the research, and you can try and get your followers, and make it, aesthetics comes into it, very, very cool. Not interested. No, because you see, we have this whole system, this guarded, controlled, have to hold onto it, we don't change it. 3 weeks later, we ran the blog program because we found out it's in the matric exam now, so now suddenly we can do it. But prior to that, it's this guardedness, it's this control all the time. So sometimes you need to just have that flexibility that, am I really holding on to the right stuff? Is this as important as I'm making it? There's a whole world out there. At the same time, there's a whole world out there. Are you exposing kids to this? Are you giving them the tools and encouraging them to go for it and explore this world? Or are you keeping them in little boxes? It's for 5 marks. This is my most important one. If it decides to go. Is encouraging active engagement with the changing world. I spoke about that first slide about the way the world is changing. How are we encouraging kids to make a difference and go for that and get engaged with it and want to do something with that world? And that active engagement is a term, does anyone know Maxine Green? She's an educational writer in the United States. She died in May this year. And she has a term she calls passive gazing. And passive gazing are those students you have in class who you can see they're looking at you, but it's kind of a situation where the wheel is turning but the hamster's dead. They're not, they've checked out. They're not paying. They're not paying attention. You ask a question and you just sort of get, I also call it the aquarium effect. It feels like you're looking at a bowl of goldfish. Just sort of stare at you for a bit. That's not actively engaged. And I like the way a lot of people say that, the iPad is taking kids' attention away, kids are not focusing in class. Oh yeah, because they were so focused, they never, ever got distracted in class before the iPad. My kids are completely focused. So, we're encouraging that. And again, in your own practice, are you excited about the world? Are you excited about things that are changing? Are you trying to get involved in things? Or are you sitting under a rock, holding on to things? And so the journey continues. None of these things are a means to an end. None of them are mutually exclusive. They don't stop. All of these things are helpful in life beyond school. They're all things that if you do, can lead you to success. And that is why it's something that I really want to encourage you. Because I'm getting the iPad stuff, I promise. This, I think, is an important question to ask. What is the literature meant to do? And this, I open up to the floor. What is it meant to do? Why do you A, teach it, or B, why do you read literature? What's the point? You're lucky number one.
I teach 8th grade language.
Okay.
So the literature for me that I choose, a theme that I carry throughout is gaining different perspective. We're reading Where the Wild Things Are right now.
Oh, cool.
And so trying to see the symbolism in children's literature, just open up their eyes of, is this a children's book, is it not? And then the whole self-awareness and that, I'm trying to get them to see it a different way. Something that they've had on their bookshelf for a long time and see it in a whole new way. So for me, literature is meant to gain a whole new perspective and see something through another's eyes.
Thank you. Yeah, that's good. Yours?
To demonstrate the art of articulation.
Saying things, expressing them properly. I often say, putting into words that which cannot be said. Yeah. I know you're not an English teacher, but
I'm not an English teacher. I teach media literacy, and I came to your session just to get some concepts of how to get students to read better, to learn to read, to understand the information they're reading, no matter what form it is in or how they're reading it.
absolutely. Your preoccupation is one that's very similar to mine, in that they're so used to being bombarded with so much information, especially web pages. We've noticed at school that presenting writing in a written form on paper, often the stuff that's at the top and down the sides, there's stuff here, they don't see it.
Right.
They actually don't read it because we're so programmed when we're browsing the internet to block out the stuff on the top and what's happening here. Those of us who are used to looking at the whole page, look at the whole page, but if you're used to looking at the internet, they actually, very often I get things back where they haven't filled their name in, it says please fill in your name, and they just don't. Because they're actually not looking. So we've got very common concerns here. Do either of you, I know you're not English teachers, either of you want to comment?
I would think I try to pull some inspiration out of it, some parallel that I can pull that I can maybe relate to my everyday life, although it's classic or something like that. Or go parallel to, this is actually happening today. People are people,
Yeah.
and eyes and something.
Very much so. I always say to people when we do Shakespeare on my soapbox, it's like the fact that in Shakespeare's plays, in the 36 plays, we have the entire spectrum of human experience. We have every single emotion, every single encounter, and they're as relevant today as they were 400 years ago, which tells you a lot of things about humanity as a species. But that to me is what the literature is meant to do. And then this word cloud kind of sums up what it is that I want my students to be doing with literature. The biggest words are biggest on purpose. That curiosity thing is huge for me. That desire to go for it, that wish to find out more, that's what I think literature is meant to do. So this next slide is very deliberately formatted. How many of you know this person? Every time you suggest something, or you ask to do something new in the class, or you try to change something, this is the reaction. And it could be a man, I just happen to find a woman. But this is the HOD that when you start suggesting, when you mention the word iPad, this is generally what happens. Oh, don't be ridiculous. So how are we pushing the envelope? For me, that's what this tool is enabling us to do. It's turning the classroom into something more like this. A dynamic space where people are starting to work differently. People are engaged, that engagement is very important. And the teacher just gets to float around, it's fun. The movement idea is very, very big. If you're sitting your students down, if they're sitting for more than 20 minutes, something needs to change. They need to move. Someone recently did a study, I forget the name now, but she walked around with students for a day. She followed their kids around. The biggest conclusion she came to is they sit a lot. And you think what it's like at these conferences, after you've had a few back-to-back sessions, you're starting to get a bit like, okay. And they've got to do it for 7, 8 periods a day. And they've got to sit, they've got to focus, they've got to pay attention. They're not in chairs as comfortable as this in most places. Whereas we get to stand and move around, talk, and I'm active, I'm going crazy all the time. I swear I walk miles every day in the classroom. So they need to be moving, they need to get going, they need to get the blood flowing. Okay, so as I said, we would get onto the iPad. So the tool I use is a program called iBooks Author. So you may be familiar with this. It's a free program for Mac computers. It's fantastic. If you have content that's already created in Pages or Word, click, drag, drop, it will convert it for you. It does it all for you. A lot of the stuff I'm going to show you, the app just does. And then I will show you the little tools I added into it, to how you use this tool. I hope this is going to be as universally applicable as I can do. I've tried to avoid just giving you a whole lot of examples of what I've done, because I want you more to have the mindset behind it to go and create your own stuff. So this is where you spend a lot of your time in iBooks Author. Okay? And this is editing the glossary. And I will show you why. So this is my edition of Macbeth. As I produced, and I say my edition of Macbeth, I didn't write it. I took Project Gutenberg, free text available, downloaded that as a doc file, drop it, done. So it does it all for me. What did I have to do? I have to do this. You'll see some places that the text is bold. Territory bold. It's enhanced. Previously, if you'd used those Stratford versions or the Cambridge, they've got stuff on the sides. So now instead of having to try and find the line, you can just tap directly on what the line is. And there's a bit of enhancement. That's what I have. Okay, so that's my stuff. This is, it takes time. I will just warn you in advance. This is 18 months worth of work. My whole summer vacation, my whole winter vacation schedule. And that's why I showed you that glossary screen, because you said you heard things. There are two ways of doing it. You can highlight the text and put the explanation in immediately, or you can do it, I'll show you the poetry one. I've highlighted piles of things throughout already that I know I'm going to talk about, and then I'm going into the glossary view and just going down them like that. Because it's, I don't know which ones works better just to. What's nice about this is that if I go to the glossary index, every single line that I have highlighted or enhanced is added to this list. And what's nice is you can then search within it. So I know, for example, and sometimes they're questions, sometimes I've given you you'll see sometimes they're much longer than others. And sometimes I ask questions. So I'll often say to them, just tap on the word there, and then you'll see there's a question, please answer the question. The idea behind this whole thing, though, is to make myself as redundant as possible. I'm trying to basically hand it to them and say, go. So this is now the next thing, the next phase I'm busy with is creating an iTunes U course that will explain everything video is built into it. So then I'm building onto that. But I'll show you what that looks like now. But for example, if we know that in class we were talking about this thing that Beth was talking about, scorpions, I type in scorpions, oh there it is. That's what the explanation was. Where was that again? Oh, it was in Act 3, Scene 2. There we are. Very easy to navigate the text and find what we're looking for. And then because it's in iBooks, all the features that iBooks already has work. So for example, I don't know what malice means. I didn't have to program that in. I didn't have to type this up. iBooks does that for you. And you can add other things. I can search the web. I can get them to explore. So I do that as well sometimes. We'll look at the term and I'll say, search the web for it. Because it doesn't have Shakespearean built into it. So often there's a Shakespearean word, the dictionary just So that's the using the glossary system. And of course, navigating the book, as you can see here, is very easy to do. Just click between the ends. The other thing that's really nice to do is you can put little self-marking quizzes in, although I've kept these to a minimum because I hate assessment, as I told you, I hate to people about the test. So I've kept these down to a very minimum, and you can't export this information. So these built-in quizzes that self-mark immediately, that information is for them only. It's for a little pop quiz for the student to jog this with their memory. If you wanted to put some kind of assessment, although I'd strongly discourage it, you could plop a little HTML widget in, and you could link that to a Google form, which you would then be able to get the responses to. So you can do that as well. I've tried to make this completely web independent because of those challenges I showed you earlier. So this is, if I took the Wi-Fi off right now, everything will still work. But for example, so what was Macbeth's initial reaction to meeting the witches? He wanted to know what they were. Let's try that one. Check answer. Straight away I get the feedback. Here we go. Macbeth's been greeted by the three. There was surrender. Let's check. Oh yeah, that wasn't right. What is Macbeth's reaction to the witches' prophecy? Is it pathetic? Oh, it's still not good. Oops. Press the wrong button. And why Macbeth reacted? Desperately wants to be king. It makes sense. Cool. But it's telling me try again because I've got 2 out of 4 right. So it'll tell me, go on, try again. And if you get them all right, it says, cool, well done. Okay? So that's a nice little bit of instant response. The other cool thing that you can do is, I very much am a proponent of the fact that this is a play for the stage, not for the page. None of Shakespeare's plays were published during his lifetime. They were all published posthumous. So he never intended for them to be read, which is great, because one of the first things I teach them with Shakespeare is the fact that there are no stage directions in the original ones at all. It's just literally character on, character off, that's it. So that gives us a lot of freedom as directors. So that's the line I would take. You'll see, if you get this, you'll see the line I take the whole time is, if you were directing this play, what would you do? How would you cast it? How would you look at it? But what I try to do is drop lots of different versions. These are all just clips I downloaded off YouTube, and I just pop them straight into the book. So we watch that section. Go for a mute. But there's a full video file that I just popped in and I can show this in the class. It's a browser. So instead of using Chrome, it's built on top of the Chrome surface, and then you use Torch, and it automatically, the second you go to any page that's got media, it will let you download it. It does it for songs as well. You might not want to do that. It's not exactly copyright friendly stuff. I've since found out you all know a lot more things on copyright than we are back then. So that's one of the things you can do. Of course, you can annotate the text as you want. So if I want to put a little thing here, I tap twice, I can make a note, put the note in. Done, there's a little note, and it automatically collates all the notes for me. So you put the notes in line with the text, the student can do that. And if I want to see any of my notes, I literally just go here. Here. And then I can see where my notes are. And I can jump straight back to where the note is made. I can read all my notes from here. This is very, very handy for studying later. I can export these. So take that note there, and I can email it to myself if I wanted to. Or you can ask students, I want you to make a note on this last section, and I want you to email that response to me. Which also cool sometimes. What's also cool is you can do these study cards. Although, to be honest, I didn't know that the glossary did this when you were setting it up. So this was kind of something I found out afterwards. I was like, oh, that's cool. So, for example, like let's look at a deep repentance, and then you've got to try and remember what does that mean? What's a deep repentance? Oh, yes, okay. So these are all part of the enhanced text, but if you were using this as clue words, for example, if you've got a whole lot of content you want to get through, so let's say you use the word equation, for example, and you want to talk about that. Then you could put equation in as the glossary term and then have an explanation, and students would have to remember what does equation mean? Oh yes, it's that. And they can self-study, go through these. And again, the app does this for you. I didn't have to now go and create, obviously I have to write all the content down, but the app did all the rest of that for me. Let me show you what's also happening, is if we go to the other one I'm busy with, I'm not happy with our poetry anthology, so I'm busy creating my own poetry anthology. What I've done is using PowerPoint's rehearsed method, is I record an array to PowerPoint, save it as a movie file. This is awful because I hate my voice. Well, it's there. You can go and do that. This is a little lecture on structure, so I go through a couple of examples from other poems, and we talk specifically. This one is talking about line. I just talk about how we vary line length and how we can change these different things. By the way, all the images I use as my backgrounds come from a website called Sockwall, SOCWALL, free social wallpapering. There's some really awesome stuff on there. Go man. Okay, so that's an example of what I'm using. I've also put an explain everything in here. Let me just find it. Which one did I use to explain everything? There. So, same idea.
In this statement, we can look at why the popular poem that moved out to change the core is a beautiful thing.
Here, so I'm not really subject myself to my
One
voice.
is based with lots of
But this one,
based on anger.
you can do a lot of it. If you've never used explain everything, you can drop text, you can drop pictures, and then you can draw little things on there, and it does it in lifetime. So this is, you can do kind of
Those
categories in
things
which
are
ways.
also getting here.
Interestingly enough, if you are going to do written work, I'm going to show you now, if we absolutely have to assess, then I strongly recommend you get one of these. This is called the Adonit Jot Pro stylus. Comes with a little plastic tip on it. And it is the most pinpoint accurate stylus that you can get.
How do you spell that?
Adonit, A-D-O-N-I-T. And it's the Jot Pro. There's a Bluetooth one that's really expensive and really fancy. And that does wrist cancellation for you and all sorts of things. I say this is good for handwriting and for using sort of whiteboard stuff. If you're into drawing and shading and pixel stuff, then definitely the flatter ones like the Wacom Bamboo and things like that are going to be better for you. All these ones we got free with the conference, those are great for tapping and using. This one's not so great for swiping between apps and stuff. This is for pinpoint accuracy things. So if I show you quickly what we can do with it, and this is one of those ways that I'm pushing the envelope and ticking off my head department who insists that the kids print out their essays. And they have to do hard copy. I just casually ignore her. And I use a program called DocAS. There's a free version and there's a pay-for version. This is the pay-for version. I think it's about $8. And let's just see. I have recently updated this. There we go. So this is something that one of my students had to do on to get a Mockingbird. We got them to write a report of the trial. That's right, a report. And this came about because she was going to be away. So she said, well, I'm going to be away for a week. What do I do? And I said, well, email me your assignment. I'll mark it digitally and email it back to you. So there it is. So if I wanted to add stuff to this, I annotate and choose whatever your color is. In South Africa, it has to be red, of course, angry red. Change your point size. I zoom right in. Oops. So now, the best thing, of course, is that if you've ever done something with a pen and you've written something, okay. You've written something in pen, you want to change it, you can just erase it immediately. I mean, how many times have you, I do this all the time, I start reading a sentence, and I think I know where they're going, and I correct something, and I get to the end of the sentence, and you go, oh, right, and I go back, a little sorry. So this is great, you don't have to worry about that. But now if I wanted to say she should have used the abbreviated one, I can just and there we go. And I can print that out, by the way. I can print that out if I needed to. So that was my argument with my HOD, is that I said, well, if you really do need one, I'll just print this for you. And I can do that. So you can do that. But what's better for me is the audio feedback. So I wrote her a little note, and as I was writing this thing, I thought, actually what's even better is if I could give you some audio, and you can. So you tap the little microphone, okay, and it's recording. It's already doing it automatically, and I can just embed that straight into the document. I'm not going to do it now. But if you listen to this one, that's a bit quiet in the system, but I gave her audio feedback. I said it was a bit weird, she wasn't expecting it. Then what happened was I'd given the entire class verbal feedback when I got back to the class, because this is a first draft, this wasn't the final. And what had happened was they all made the same sort of mistake. So I stood up and gave some general lecture about the task, and she fall into that category. So I could give her that same feedback. But now with my grade full essays, my 12th grade is already one. I don't write anything. I do little squiggle marks, do general underlines. I don't have to write out corrections anymore. Well, as they get older, we do less and less actual writing down. 8th graders, you write everything out there. But the old people, I kind of just indicate it, little audio notes, and I say, okay. And I can go on, I can give them feedback for 4 or 5 minutes, which you wouldn't be able to write out. Not for 25 students, you couldn't do that. So now it's much easier just to get right through them. There is a space thing though, so you need to sort of be aware that once you're done with those assignments, then I try to export them out to Google Drive, and that's where they can people that from. Yes?
I have a question. So my biggest dilemma that I have with writing, especially, my administration pretty much ties me to a rubric. What do you do? I mean, a kid can have this, and this, but the quality is not there. And to me, I'm much more of like the overall picture and the quality that's coming out. How do you grade it?
Grade quality.
Yeah, I mean, I just feel like grading writing is getting more and more difficult.
It is. It depends on, like, we have created sometimes, the rubric is I hate it. I mean, it's wonderful for rocking through things really, really fast. I mean, if you need to mark 25 things, tick the box, but those descriptors are never, ever accurate. You spend half the time agonizing over, is this excellent or is it meritorious? And you find yourself jumping between them. I don't like rubrics. You can use this app to do that as well, to do rubrics. So if you have a PDF of it, like this, so there's an example of a poetry worksheet I use. You could always, I don't have a rubric like that, you could always just mark rubric straight on hand. What I tend to do with rubrics is I convert them into Google Forms. So I just go down like that, and then it exports it as an Excel sheet for me, and then I go look on the Excel sheet, and then I can calculate the marks. There is a bit of calculation required, unless I'm being a bit stupid about it. Maybe I can figure out a way to make it add itself up. But so far, there is a plugin you get for Google Forms called Flubberoo, which is a self-grading. So if you've already got Google Docs, which if you don't have Google Apps for Education, get it. And if you go into Google Sheets and you go to plugins, you look for Flubberoo, Flubbaroo, and what it will do is it allows you to create a memo. So you do the form first, and you get a set of answers. You tell it these are the answers you use, and then every consequence response it will then regrade. It gives you statistics on how many students are answering which question incorrectly. You can identify your weak spots and identify weak students for you automatically. It's not so great for open-ended questions. You can do open-ended questions if you can tell it to ignore them. You can also program it to ignore certain spellings. So if you can already anticipate that your kids are going to spell science 4 different ways, then you can program all the spellings of science into automatic mark. But obviously, English, we tend to want them to spell properly, so we can be quite strict about if they spell wrong. Okay, so I mean, this is another example of DocAS is quite helpful. I always like so what typically happens is that because you have poetry anthology, and then you get a worksheet, which is just a set of questions, that's what you get. And for me, there's often a disconnect. They can't remember what the poem was, they can't remember which page it's on, so I always present them together. I always make sure that the questions are there. And I also always make sure my questions lead directly to the text. So I want you to answer a question about this section. So I draw the lines. So you can see where the lines are pointing to the text.
I always had to do the little numbers, like on the side, and
Yeah.
so referred, and I always had to like handwrite in the numbers and make copies, and it was always a pain because I would miss a number. So.
Yeah, exactly. So this is just straight. These are just using your word shapes, the shapes that come with Word. I'm more familiar with Microsoft Office than I am with Pages. Although if you can do this one in Pages, well, you're more familiar with that. Use Pages probably. And this is I'm like showing these is kind of what I'm trying to move away from. I'm going to try and make them a lot more interactive and popping up, and that's where the poetry anthology is coming in. So I'm going to hopefully, with this, I'm going to start building that sort of stuff into the work itself, so that it's there, although I'm still figuring out quite how to connect it. The other thing that's really helpful is, I don't know if any of you've taught Musée de Beaux-Arts by Beethoven. Beautiful poem, but he makes allusions to artworks. And often you have to kind of Google them or say, oh, you should go look them up now. Built into the text, there's the Icarus, there's the painting to which he's referring in the poem. But I can also compare it to a whole series that Bruegel did. And he makes sort of obscure references to these in the poem. Icarus is the one that he's making the most explicit reference to. But I can do things like, I mean, if you're not familiar with this, does anyone know what scene or dramatic event this is depicting? This one. This is the crucifixion. You can sort of find Jesus in the middle. But it takes you a while. And he's deliberately hidden the colour and made it fake. Because Bruegel is trying to show that in the midst of other suffering, life goes on. And again, if we use storytelling, I always, when I teach this poem, tell the story of my grandmother died. I got to call my grandmother's dead. I had to get to the hospital to go and support my mom and everyone. And what amazed me was that the traffic didn't part for me. The robots weren't, sorry, traffic lights were called robots. The traffic lights weren't all green. People weren't suddenly nicer to me. I couldn't find parking. The world didn't stop because I was experiencing this huge tragedy. And very much like this situation. This next one is the birth of Christ. And again, if you didn't, I didn't tell you, you wouldn't know. Go back to the Icarus painting. I always say, find Icarus, and you're surprised to see who gets to find Icarus first. What's quite cool is I learned a tool already from the last session. There's a thing called Pear Deck, P-E-A-R Deck. And what you can do with that is you can upload a picture, and then the students, kind of like Kahoot, the students can join in and they can tap on the image, and you can see live where people are tapping. So I can always say, okay, who wants to tap and show me where Icarus is? You can get them to feed into that. That was just an idea that reason. But again, this is all stuff that I've built into the book, and it's now there. It's there with the poem, and it's there, done, finished. And those are all Creative Commons license. I can have those. I got it right for this book. The Macbeth one, I kind of didn't know the whole copyright thing, so I kind of just put whatever I wanted into it because I didn't want to make money out of it. So when it came to uploading it on the iBook store, they suddenly asked for all this copyright stuff. I'm not too sure, so I kind of just use it for myself now. But this poetry one I'm doing, I'm getting all the permissions and things, so it's taking a bit longer. But everything you see has been Creative Commons license approved, which if you don't know how to do, it's a very important skill. Learn how to look at Creative Commons license stuff, not Google images. So that's what I do with the iBooks. Just to get back to here. So as I said, you spend a long time in the screen, and then those little things, the blue one tells you it's in progress. You can also change it to red. So you say, well, this one's definitely wrong, I haven't done it, and the green tells me, okay, it's finished. I'm slowly working my way to make sure these little bubbles go green as I move along. So the other ideas we've got, so I mean, these are things to be using. So I use big time. And what I do is, like that example I showed you in the video where I put a piece of text in to explain everything and I annotate it and I talk over it. I'm now getting the students to create their own ones. So what I do is I divide them up and I say, okay, you're doing lines 1 through 4, you're doing these, you're doing these, you're doing these. And then the best ones, my plan is to take those and build it with the book, so it's not just my voice all the time. Because bad as it is, they don't want to listen to it all the
How
time.
do you distribute your iBooks to the students?
At the moment, bring me your iPad, if they've got one, which we've got, I think I've got 2, we've got an iPad, we're not one-to-one yet. And then they come to bring it to me, I take the Mac and I'm doing everything on, I plug it in, I can preview it goes
So
with it.
you can't actually do it without,
Yeah, without going through iBooks, no.
so when you sit hit preview, where's,
So if you're in the iBooks author app,
yeah,
at the top,
I know it, now I know.
yeah, okay, top there.
Yeah.
So they plug the device in once they're all talking and they're all happy with each other, so you can preview it.
And it automatically syncs to the.
They've got to have the latest version of iBooks on the iPad. It must be open, and then once you do that, you can
Oh, okay.
like, it's very, if you're going to do it with like 40 kids, it's going to take you, it's going to take a good day or two. But I've also put it on Google Drive. Apparently some problems downloading it on Google Drive.
I've done Dropbox, and she said that.
Yeah, because it splits it up into a different folder and does some things like this. It's all different other
Last time
formats.
it's a maximum file size you find in
Well, my Macbeth is 1.3 gigs. Not the one, but it's huge because it's got, I put video to just play every single scene and it's really enhanced with lots of pictures. So So that's really big. I haven't had to do it beyond that, so I can't really answer the question. The reason I use Google Drive, not only for the bundled apps, but because they give you way more space than Dropbox does. And also, interesting fact is if you use Google Apps within Google Drive, they don't count towards your space. So if you're using Google Docs as your word processor and you save those, it doesn't use an iota of space.
Google Education is
Yes, Google. Yeah, if you're a gap school, it's unlimited. But some of the crazier ideas that I've had. These are some of the things we started working around. So I have Macbeth's Instagram account. I asked him if Macbeth had an Instagram account, what would he do? Or if you got all of you with Instagram, go show me a picture that Macbeth would take in Instagram. How would he filter it? And you've got to get into the character's head to do that. Because Instagram is very personal, the filters we choose, the angles we choose, and then they have to write an accompanying analysis to that. So why have I taken this picture? Why does it fit the character? Snapchats from Walt Whitman, same sort of idea, just a slightly more fun one. The soundtrack for The Wasteland, the very big poem, this is what I do with my advanced program students. Get GarageBand together and I get them sections and they have to compose on GarageBand and to do the soundtrack to it. Student-generated curations, where I get them to collaborate to get a whole lot of different things together to present as one item. So I'll go, for example, and say I want a curation on Act 2, please. And that means I need to find the music that fits, they need to find the pictures that fit, things with costumes, they need to try and get it all together that I can have the entire experience, and then of course I can share it out. It's an example of collaborative learning. The Erasmus Discovery Tours are quite fun, so you use Erasmus, which is an augmented reality application. What it does is it looks at a target, and then it puts a layer on top of the target. So a lot of people do that to make, like, you can do a drawing of the planet, you can make it spin on the page and stuff like that. What I do is I program clues, and then I put them up all over the school. It's great, free lessons with me. I just say, go and find it. And then they've got to know I need the clues about the lines. And if they get the right target image, so for example, Macbeth says his mind is full of this, and they're going to find the picture of scorpions. And when they find the picture of scorpions, something appears over that tells them where the next clue is, and they do a little treasure hunt. The first person to get back to the code where is the one that's one. So that's an example of what I've done. As I said, 25 iPads in the whole school, so it's a bit rare to get hold of them. But when I do, this is the type of thing I can do. The movie sonnets are quite fun. They've got 14 scenes to create an idea, like a sonnet. So they've got to do the first 8, they've got to create an idea. Then at the last 6, there's got to be some kind of twist and change. And the last 2 need to look very similar to the rhyming couplet, things like that. Just playing around with the terms. And then presentation, which is a little thing. What it does is that you can create your PowerPoint presentation or your keynote, upload it to presentation, and then your phone becomes your presenter, and it live records you as well. But what's quite cool is if you have a question, you can live push it to me, and then if I want to respond, I touch on the question and it will project it on the board and we can talk about it. And I can do live polls through the website. And then
What's the
presentation. So it's present and then AIN.
it doesn't require
Oh yeah, it does. That's very exciting, so I'm not big on using that one. Anyone who's taught a research thing will know the importance of following it up. This is the little sub-warning. This is where the teacher's involvement comes. Is you need to oversee what they're doing. So yes, sending them off to do research and explore is great, but anyone who's used the will know there's a lot of junk out there. There's a lot of rubbish, and it's your job to sort of oversee this. Has anyone used AirServer before? That's if you don't have money for Apple TVs. And if you already have, so every classroom we have has a computer, desktop computer, that's connected to a projector. People kept on breaking them. People are very rough with other people's stuff, so they rip them out of the machine, break the graphics card, break the things. So our IT department has now hardwired that you cannot remove them unless you've got them. So presenting with this is not an option unless you want to lie on the floor under the desk and talk to it. So what we've done is installed AirServer, and what that does is it uses your computer as a portal to talk to the projector. Very cool tool. There's one with Reflector as well. There's AirParrot. It does audio as well. So if the audio system is all connected to the PC, this will do the job for you. I think it's something like $20 for 50 licenses or something like that. It's not expensive. The last little section, to get back to the philosophical argument on this, is talking about the fact that we make students jump. South Africa has jumped between school and colleges and all this. And it's up to us to change that. Because expecting them to do this, fine, he looks like he's going to make it, he looks quite strong, but I don't think a lot of them can. And I think a lot of them see the hole coming and they just don't want to start running. And it's up to us to change that. How are you doing that? What is it that you're doing towards that? This is kind of how I see school now. Like, this is what our students are like. They've got all the tools. They've got parachutes, they've got swimming trunks, they've got surfboards, they're ready, but we throw them to the sharks. But they've got everything they need. They've got the grades, they've got a 3.0 grade average. And we throw them off to the sharks. Are we doing this? Are we changing that? This is something my colleagues spoke about. What I call the cathedral theory. This is a picture of Cologne Cathedral. It took 480 years to build on and off. The point is, the man who designed this and who started building it did so knowing that not him, nor his son, nor his son's son, nor his son's son's son, nor his would see it finished. And yet they started. If you feel like you're not going to win the battle, if you feel like there's no point in starting, just get started. You do not know what the foundation literacy is, what you're creating. And this goes for digitizing your environment, moving to one-to-one, getting your students engaged. What is it you're going to do? And I hope it's going to be a space of liberation, a space of freedom. I hope it's going to be a thing where it breaks up the barriers to feel like, yes, I can take on the world. I've got one little video to show you, which I think a lot of us will connect to. I hope you can hear it. But there are subtitles, which I hope you can see. Anyone who's tried to teach someone something in technology, usually my mom, you go through this experience. That was just a life on the way. If you want to contact me, if you want to get in touch, there are my deeds. Please feel free to email me. I'm very keen to share and to get engaged with things. That QR code is a link to the video. If you want to watch the video, if you want to get there. But yeah, I would love to hear from you. I'd love to create international networking if you want to do some stuff with South Africa. I'm not teaching college at all anymore. I just teach AP English now. But I'm involved across the whole school, pre-K through 12. So if you do want to network on any topic, any subject, just give me a shout. We can try and set something up. Otherwise, I hope this has been helpful. Thank you very much.